I'd like to start by asking Jeff about the US market so far in 2021. Obviously, food service demand fell to a very low level in 2020. What are you seeing so far this year? How is that balance between retail and food service now?
First of all, the entire shrimp market in 2021 couldn't be more different than what we saw in 2020. It's as divergent as I could ever have imagined. What we had obviously during 2020 was very low demand and a real problem with understanding how to inventory, how to carry inventories, because we just didn't know when things would open here in Europe also, and also we didn't know what kind of impact it was going to be in the production areas. 2021 has completely turned that issue on its head that we had in 2020. Despite the fact that so much business was closed down during 2020, and that we started the year with probably unprecedentedly high inventories that were so high that we were having difficulties getting product from the dock into warehouses. Yeah. We were having to actually negotiate with warehouses where they would let us bring a container in if we got a container out. Well, again, despite the lower demand, ultimately, by attrition, those inventories began to drop, and there was very little replacement, both because importers were reticent to buy and because some of the producing countries began to have COVID problems. So what we're seeing right now is a really significant shortage of many items, many of the primary items in the US, and it's indicated both in the driving of the pricing and the fact that for the first time in 13 or 14 months, we have warehouses calling us, containers coming, and can we shift some of the business that we shifted away from them back to them? I'm specifically talking about port freezers that we had to, that couldn't handle our business before, and we had to ship products inland. This doesn't look like we're going to see any significant let up over the next few months. Food service has, as expected, exploded. The problem we had was we all kind of expected it. What we didn't know was when it would happen. So our initial thought was that business would get a lot better as restaurants in the northern states were able to start to serve again outdoors. So many of us began to, marginally or very carefully stock in anticipation that business would open up some. What we've seen instead is a pretty massive opening across the board in most states. In fact, virtually all states. And I think a lot of COVID, what are they calling it? COVID fatigue among customers. So food service, we're having the same problem that food service now that we had with retail before. When COVID first hit and product was readily available for both food service and retail business exploded, food service stopped, and most repacking product from food service packs into retail packs. In anticipation or failure to anticipate when this was going to change, and with the demand that we saw, the increased demand that we saw for retail, most of us shifted our buying to retail focused products, and consequently we're all short right now of food service products. Prices have increased dramatically. In some cases, up $1 a pound. And for most customers, there is a more or less a short-term view. What they're seeing now is, oh my gosh, prices have gone up crazy. In fact, prices have only gone up back to where they pretty much normally are. And with the rebound of the prices being up is from a very low baseline that was caused by the fact that there was product available and no demand. Retail, as we talked about when we had this last webinar, retail exploded. And from what we're seeing, what we anticipated before is carrying through. It's backed off a little bit. There is not as much retail demand, or not panic demand. However, it's backed off to a point that's still significantly higher than it was before COVID. And now with food service coming back into play, what we're seeing is what we think will be indicated later in statistics of higher consumption or higher imports and consumption of shrimp. We don't have the kind of panic calls from retailers right now that we had 4 months ago, 5 months ago, but business is still very good. And just as with the food service now, we're beginning to have issues with getting product in to the right places at the right time, because now we're dealing with, curiously, when people use the term perfect storm, it's generally three things. So we have those three things happening right now. Business is picking up dramatically. The COVID is apparently rearing its ugly head again significantly in producing countries. India, and Jim mentioned to me earlier, Thailand, for example. And the container issues that we're all familiar with are significantly impacting the availability of product. So we've gone from having way too much product and freezers full to having orders that we can't fill, including orders that we did buy the product to fill, but the product hasn't shipped, or it's delayed in shipping because of container problems, or it's placed in places around the world in transshipment, and we don't know when we're going to get it. The bottom line is, I think that we're going to see food service rebound back to normal levels, and retail is not going to lose all the additional business that they picked up during COVID. We have probably a whole class of people, my daughter being one of them at 35 years old, who never cook shrimp or fish at home. It's just not something they did, and they've learned to now. And although they are going to continue to go out and have the experience of eating out in restaurants, seafood has now become I don't want to say a staple, but it's become a option for cooking at home for millions and millions of people that it wasn't before. And this is going to cause us quite a bit of problem for the next few months. Obviously, if we didn't have the container problems or the supply problems due to COVID, and that pipeline could get filled, we wouldn't be seeing this too much and then too little and too much and then too little happening. I see no immediate possibility of alleviating that problem. Business is going to keep growing. Demand is going to keep growing. And from the look of it, the supply problems are either going to stay the way they are or possibly get worse.
Right.
Just bottom line, with one question that was asked is, we're not going to see a big drop off on retail, even though food service is coming back.
Okay. I wanted to move on to India. Obviously, they're having an awful time with coronavirus. And I wanted to ask each of our panelists, maybe starting with Jeff and Jim again. I think you both touched on how India's problems are affecting the supply picture at the moment. What can we expect in terms of other countries maybe winning market share from India is anyone going to be able to compete in that space, or can anyone meet the sheer volumes that India sends to the US? If we start with Jeff.
Yeah, the simple answer to that is no. If you look back at when we had EMS problems and Thailand was producing 600,000 tons a year, and then things went down there, even had the other countries not had EMS and picked up, there's just no replacing that volume. Now, India has become basically the benchmark for, at least for the US market. And although I should back that up. Ecuador has done a great job of filling the needs that we have that we're not being able to get supplied by India. However, even Ecuador is going to have a limit. The shrimp, from what we understand, is there. There's no real issues with having shrimp. The issue is, can they get it processed and can they get it shipped? Two different situations. There is, and I missed a lot of what Jim said because I kept getting kicked off, but I caught part of it. There is no prospect in the near future, in the next few months, of this changing, because even if it changed overnight, there's going to be a 3, 4, 5 month lag time. And by the time things can get better, even if they started right now, we'll be into the holiday cycle of buying. So unfortunately, the answer is no. If India cannot get straightened out, and even if they do, we're going to see a pipeline issue for a long time to come.
Sure.
I think, like Jim said, right through the end of the year.
There was a month last year, and this is just off the top of my head, there was a month last year where India went down from 70 million to 20 million in exports to the USA. And I don't know if it was June or July. It was right on the summer where they were down drastically because they were going through their first wave of COVID. So with that, what I mean is, even though they may slow down, they may still be above last year's numbers, because that was a deep dive last year from 70 million to 25 million, I think it was. And I'm just recalling numbers from my head. So even if they ship 30 million this year, they'll still be up 2-3% from last year, but it's vastly short for what the market needs and depends from them.
But there's another factor in some of that increase, and that is during the time period you're talking about, demand here was low, freezers were full, and my Indian suppliers were jammed with inventory in their freezers, and unhappy with the pricing levels that had fallen. Farmers were actually giving them a very difficult time. So, not a lot maybe, but some of the increase that you've seen was just backlogged inventory that finally shipped.
Okay.
And then the other issue that we have, and we're hitting right now, is for so many months there was no food service business, and the food service companies basically depleted their inventories over that time. And as things opened up, the latent demand is huge. So we had to go really, I don't want to say crazy, but we increased our imports or our purchases by a lot, and only part of those purchases actually turned into imports, and the rest of them are still sitting backlogged. Yeah. Neil, may make a point, because we're talking about just now about Vietnam. And this is kind of a thing that we don't talk about a lot. However, we really don't know how much of the Vietnam production is actually Indian raw material. So, if we have this backlog of Indian raw material, two things could happen. A positive is India will not be able to value add because they have so much issues with COVID and they don't have the labor. So they'll produce a lot more headless shrimp. That could go to a place for reprocessing. On the other hand, I don't know that we have any reason to believe that they can ship to Vietnam any easier than they can ship anywhere else in terms of the container issues. So.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. Okay. I know we're actually moving towards the end of the time that we'd suggested. So I wanted to ask quickly about the Seaspiracy documentary on Netflix. Not so much your thoughts on it. I don't know if everyone's seen it or not. But I wanted to know whether it had filtered through into the supply chains that you work with. Have you seen sort of additional requests for evidence that there's nothing upsetting happening in supply chains? If Jeff, I can come back to you again quickly on that.
For us, it's become yesterday's news. We had a little flurry for a week or days with people asking questions, most of them being our customers who were only concerned about how they should answer if they got a lot of flack. And there was some flack out there, but mostly from people who were already in that camp of anti-aquaculture or anti-fishing. And that's kind of, from our perspective, it's waned. I haven't heard the word Seaspiracy until you wrote it to me, probably in 2 or 3 weeks.
Maybe if I could ask each person as quickly as they can to kind of give a summary outlook, maybe looking at the sort of holidays, Christmas this year. Essentially, are we going to see some ordering normality? I mean, a few of you touched on it saying no, but just to round off, what do you see by way of the ordering situation for the end of 2021, start of 2022? Jack?
I think actually we're going to see some ordering normalities in that ordering is going to be quite a bit bigger than what we would have expected. The problem is going to be a supply situation, not an ordering situation. I don't see how the supply chain and the pipeline gets filled. We're going to have retailers who are trying to figure out now how much of that increased business they'll keep, begin to look at their normal time to order it, which is next month for holiday business. And I don't see any difference in the ability of the producers to produce value-added goods, cooked shrimp, P&D shrimp for retail. So we're going to have a big problem.
Yep.
I think we're going to see 2021 as a watershed year for what we're talking about. We've been talking with Ecuador for 15 years about getting mechanized, getting into the marketplace that Vietnam and then India kind of took, Thailand originally. Mm-hmm. What we're seeing right now, and we're very involved in this, is I'm shopping for a lot of equipment right now. We've gone from the skepticism and more or less everybody in Ecuador that I dealt with saying, yeah, we need to do this. We need to address that market. We're going to do it soon. This year, with what happened in China, has opened the eyes and said, Ecuador is looking at it now and saying, there's no reason we can't have a big piece of this steady market, not the market that goes up and down, but the program business market, the supermarket business. Yeah. So I think we're going to see that 12 cents, first of all, is negligible, and I think it's going to go away. And the second part of that is once the investment is made, and we're not just talking about shifting from hand peeling to going back to head on. Once the investment is made, the equipment's in place, people are going to run those plants. They're going to run that equipment.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And that would put us in a position where we haven't been ever as a supplier for a program business. And then that brings to a point of sometimes, and it was mentioned here, that there was a point in the year where Ecuador's prices were so low that everybody wanted to buy from Ecuador, and we increased our participation in Europe because our prices were so low. They were so low because we're not doing the program business. They were so low because in the program we're selling the next 2 weeks of product. We're not selling July.
Right.
India's trying to sell August. That's the program business. That's the mentality we need to get into as Ecuadorians. We need to supply a constant program of X amount of pounds out of our total production need to be on a fixed program. That way, the amount of product on the daily, I want to say stock market price, or on the daily, what's the word is,
Spot market.
the spot market. That's what I wanted to say. The spot market price, that needs to be decreased. If there's less spot product available, there's less fluctuation, and everybody needs less fluctuation because we need this to be as stable as it can be. Of course, always supply and demand will bring it up and down, but spot market brings it spiking up and then it drops it immediately. And then when everybody loses money, everybody's upside down with their inventory. They bought what they didn't need, right? But if we get a large percentage of our production out of the spot market, this will be a nicer playing field for everyone.
And it hasn't been lost on the Ecuadorians that over the last year, people like me have bought hundreds of containers of very inexpensive Ecuador shrimp and sent them to China and Vietnam to be peeled. This is not lost on them. They're seeing it now.
Absolutely. And it still continues to happen. It happens now. It's happening right now with even these prices, which are much higher than before. It's still happening that shrimp is being sent to be peeled to shrimp plants in China. Out of that percentage of shrimp that goes to China, in the past, it was 97, 98% head on. And now it's borderline 85. It's 85, 80, 87. There's a lot of that shrimp that is headless shrimp that's going to be reprocessed either for local consumption or their exports, whatever it is they're using it for, I'm not sure, but it goes to their plants because the plants are the ones demanding it. So it's definitely a change and something that we are noticing and that we need to change. So rather than sending our product over there, and that does away with that 12 cents we were speaking of before.
Yeah.
May I make one last comment, because you had brought it up in some of what you sent me, is just on the marketplace, we may see a phenomenon that we saw several years ago when India ramped up so aggressively and didn't have the capacity to value add. We may find a divergent market over the next few months where headless shrimp is falling and value-added shrimp continues to climb. And that's something that is probably one of the most important factors that we need to be watching.